Three different cameras going. All right. Okay. Hello and welcome to today's video where we're going to be talking about why our current systems of production and consumption, our current systems of how we treat each other as humans, our current systems of socializing, our current systems of all of these things that we do are not designed for anyone to be thriving and healthy. Okay? Because there has been a lot of talk lately in the world about how our systems are not designed for the feminine hormone system. That those who identify as female or who have female biology or whatever it is, that our systems are not set up for the female way of life, and we need cycles and we need rest and we need to honor our cycle and all of these things, and it's super not what the system does. And then there's this follow-up kind of logic that says that the system is designed for the male system or anyone who has like male biology or male hormones or male whatever. And that this system is great for people who are in a masculine body, but not great for people who are in a feminine body. And I wanted to address this today because I feel like this, again, is a complete misunderstanding of what health is and what humans need to be healthy. And even the kind of like gender binary and all that stuff, like there is just so much to unpack in this reasoning that I feel like is very important to unpack. And then to go deeper and beyond that, to just say, like why this system doesn't work for humans. And so that we can start to understand that this isn't about figuring out who the system works the best for, or kind of making justifications that we should only change it for some people, or we should only, make adjustments for some bodies, but it's fine for other bodies. Because, again, the reality is that the systems that we're living in and the systems that we're working with are not healthy for anybody. It does not matter how you identify. It doesn't matter how your hormones are set up. It doesn't matter how you express. It doesn't matter literally anything. It doesn't. If you are a human in a human body with any kind of human biology, our system is not set up to help you thrive. This is something we need to understand as a humanity so that we can connect together as a humanity. We can stop having kind of wars of who this system is for and who it is not for. And we can start to, again, understand that like fighting amongst ourselves, or even like trying to say that, again, that this system is healthy for anyone, it means that we're misunderstanding. Okay? So that's what we're going to talk about today. Now, again, I understand that this topic is sensitive, and especially when we're talking about things like gender and hormones and this kind of thing. And I really don't want to get into even a debate about that, because that's not what this is about. So the first thing that I want to say that is, I think, super important is literally no matter how you identify, no matter what you believe to be true about human biology or gender fluidity or whatever it is, that's not really what this talk is about. And I also just want you to know that whatever you believe and however you identify and whatever you feel is true for you, you're safe here. This isn't about judging people for what they believe or what they have experienced. And I just want everyone to know that, again, this is a safe space. No one's going to judge you here for how you identify or what you feel is true. And so long as you're not judging or kind of infringing upon the safety or the rights of anyone else, I have no problem with what you believe. Now, from there, I want us to start to understand why this system that we have currently is not healthy for anybody. Okay? Why it is not set up to support the male physiology any more than it's set up to support any other kind of physiology. Because again, in real reality, we do understand that there is so much variation in our human biology that we can look at a woman biology versus a man biology and say that there's lots of differences there. But at the same time, we can take two women or two men and look at their biology and see that there are also kind of dramatic variations between people in the same category. And this is why I think we have a hard time with categorization, because on the one hand, we can fit ourselves into categories, and there are kind of, some ways in which the human's biology is similar among all of us. Like, there are definitely things about humans, like all humans, that we share. And then there are things about us that are variant among us. And then there are ways that we can categorize ourselves. And then there are ways that within those categorizations, there's still lots of variation. So I understand that we can get to a place where we try to essentialize, and we try to say everyone is like this, and anyone who fits into this category has to be like this. And that is usually our way of just trying to simplify what is a very complex reality. To try to essentialize the human experience down to these fixed categories and saying that everyone needs to fit into these fixed categories, it's almost always going to lead us to trouble, because nature is very complex and we are a part of nature, and there's always going to be variation and there's always going to be differentiation. So we don't, especially in this conversation, I don't want to get into a debate about what is a man and what is a woman and what is male biology and what is female biology, because again, I feel like that's missing the point of what I'm trying to talk about here, which is, again, that I don't care what kind of human biology you have. I don't care how you identify. I don't care how you have altered your body in whatever way you've altered it to be any specific way. I don't care what it is that you are experiencing. Our system is not set up to support your health. It is not going to be good for you, no matter who you are, no matter what kind of body you occupy. This way of working, this way of consuming, this way of relating to one another does not support our health generally. Okay? So that's the first thing. We need to understand that the 9-to-5 workday was never intended to be something that was healthy and functional and good for the human body. That was never the intention. That was never where it came from. That was not the point. The point was not to create a system that was healthy, that was going to support human life. And this is the whole entire point that we need to understand when we're looking at our systems and how they have been set up. They are inverted. Our cultural systems of consumption, production, the way that we relate to ourselves and the way we relate to one another are completely backwards from what would be healthy for the human individual. And that is because the very foundation of the system we are living in, the very idea of how we were going to build a system, was built on the idea that the entire point of the system is to create maximum profits for those who are the owners of the means of production at the expense of everybody else. That was the point. That is still the point. The entire system that we are working within is set up around the idea that success and a good system creates the most amount of profit for those who are at the top of the system at the expense of everyone and everything else. That is the root of all of our systems. Okay? We need to understand that forever pretty much forever. Like even before the advent of kind of our modern culture and corporate ways of being, we had kings and queens. We had rulers that controlled the masses by controlling the resources, by having military and people that were on their side defending their hoarding of resources and defending their control over the resources. And that is how they controlled the people, right? When a group of people by force has rulership over the things that humans need in order to survive, food, shelter, clothing, safety, they then are going to have the capacity to control the people. They will have the capacity to say, we're going to set the rules for how much you have to work and what you have to do and what you're going to get in exchange for that labor. Because the reality is, in order to have our needs met, we do have to work, right? Houses don't just build themselves. Food doesn't just grow itself. Well, I mean, it does, but it doesn't harvest itself. It doesn't distribute itself. No matter how close to nature we're living, no matter how utopic our society could become, we would still have to put in effort to have our human needs met in order to build and sustain and maintain infrastructure, in order to have complex systems where we are trading goods, where we are growing goods, where we are making houses. Like I said, all of these things that we need to do to keep ourselves alive and to make our lives good require labor on some level. So there's no way of moving towards a system where all we ever have to do is lay on the beach and eat mangoes naked. Like, I understand that there's a fantasy about that, but like that would never work, because at the end of the day, in order to survive, nature isn't set up for us to just live in nature and survive. That's why survival was so hard for so long. And so, again, when people are able to take control over the things that we need in order to survive, they then get to decide. They then get to dictate the methods of production and the methods of consumption that are going to be normal and that are going to be expected and that are going to be how everyone has to be in order to have their needs met. And to try to do anything other than that, to try to move yourself out of that system, is usually going to mean you either don't get your needs met, or you face the threat of violence, or you face the threat of being kicked out of society. Like, there's consequence to not going along with whatever the system is that has been set up by the people who control the resources. And so this has been, again, how culture has been set up for a very long time. There have been absolutely communities and cultures all throughout human history that didn't operate like this, that didn't operate through this power and control method, but actually operated through cooperation and healthy ways of getting the group's needs met in a cooperative way. Okay? That has existed throughout human history. And usually that's existed in smaller communities where everyone knew everybody and where there was a good amount of resource, and where people understood that cooperation and working together worked better for everyone to get their needs met than a few people getting their needs met so much more than everyone else, and everyone else suffering, and them having to defend that position with violence usually, okay? But essentially, as we've continued to become larger and larger groups of people, as we've started to, again, become more and more colonized and all of these things that happened, we've seen more and more of this model of domination. Okay, so we do not live in a system of cooperation. We do not live in a healthy system of understanding pragmatically what humans need in order to thrive, or to even to survive and to thrive and to have a good life. And then creating a system around that based on how can we all contribute in the ways that we can contribute, which is different for everybody, right? We need to understand that there's going to be variation among how much people can contribute, what people can contribute, what things people are good at, what things people are not good at, and how can we work with that to build a system so that we're producing enough to get our needs met, but we're not overproducing, we're not overtaking from the environment, we're not over burning ourselves out to produce more than we actually need, nor are we consuming more than we need, right? Like we as a culture, especially in the West, do not have a healthy idea of what enough productivity is and what enough consumption is. We do not have a healthy balance of understanding that production and consumption should be, in a healthy society, a simple means to an end. That we produce as much as we need to produce to meet our needs and no more. And we consume as much as we need to consume to have a good life, to be happy, healthy, and thriving, without consuming so much that we necessitate, a violent system, that we necessitate exploitation, that we necessitate the big issues we have in our culture. Okay? Our culture, again, like I have already said, is set up as though production and consumption are in and of themselves virtuous, good things that are always good. That's the first invert of our reality, of our structure. It's built as though productivity and consumption are the ultimate goals, and that there's no amount of productivity and no amount of consumption that is bad, so long as it's contributing to ever increasing profit margins for those who own the means of production. This is unbalanced. This is unhealthy. This is out of alignment with how reality functions. And yet it is our foundation for how our system is set up. Okay? So like I said, the 9-to-5 workday was not set up for anyone's hormonal system. It was not set up to support any human biology. That is not why the 9-to-5 system is what it is. The reason the 9-to-5 system is what it is because we were starting to move from a place where actual slavery was no longer okay. We were moving away from legitimate, you are just going to work as hard as I want you to work and as hard as I need you to work so that there's continual productivity and production of the goods that I as an owner have. And we were moving away from that. But those who owned the means of production didn't want to give up on having extreme wealth. They didn't want to give up on having extreme luxury. They didn't want to give up on having so much more than they actually needed. So they had to come up with a way of creating a work system where the workers were still going to be exploited and the workers were still going to be producing more than was necessary for the culture, more than was necessary to be produced for everyone to have enough. And they needed to figure out a way of doing that and creating a system where we all agreed that that was okay. And that's the 9-to-5 work system. Yeah? That is the 9-to-5 work system. It's still set up with the intention of exponential productivity, exponential profits, creating more than we actually need, working more than we actually need. It was a way of having human beings function as though they were machines, because again, the 9-to-5 system was starting to happen in and around the time of the Industrial Revolution, where we were inventing machines that could do work that humans previously had to do, but then we still needed humans to work the factory lines. We still needed humans to do a bunch of things that machines couldn't do. And so again, there was this shift from, working in the fields and agriculture to factories and manufacturing and all of this. And also, war, profiteering, and all of this stuff was all happening in and around the same time. And again, that 9-to-5 workday was set up so it looked like more freedom than slavery, and it looked like more freedom than the systems we had before. But it, like I say, it wasn't set up for health. It wasn't set up so that everyone was thriving. Again, it was still set up with the intention that we need to have as much production as possible, because the more we can produce, the more we can sell. And then on top of that, the next level of manipulation in our system is the constantly being convinced that we need to increase our consumption. Because if we're going to keep having increased profit, the only way to continue to increase profit is to increase production, but then we also have to increase consumption. These two things go hand in hand. You can't just keep producing and producing and producing, and just because you make it doesn't mean you're going to get a profit, right? You need to actually sell that thing, whatever it is that you're producing, whatever good or service that you're rendering. It needs to be purchased in order for it to generate profit. And so, again, our culture is built around this idea of manufactured discontent. The entire culture that we live in is built on the idea of manufactured discontent, so that we are all always feeling a state of lack, of not enough, that we're not doing enough, that we're not secure, that we don't have enough, that we don't have the right things, that we're not good enough. And that feeling is what is continually manipulated by advertisers who are selling us whatever they're selling us, in order to get us to continue to consume things that we don't need and that aren't going to actually help us feel better. Okay, so there's a lot of manipulation going on here. And the systems that we have, again, are not designed, they are not set up for anyone to thrive. No one thrives getting up before the sun comes up, going to an office, or going to a warehouse, or going somewhere inside where you're going to sit under fluorescent lighting, you're going to breathe stale air, you're going to do work that doesn't feel meaningful or purposeful to you, you're going to feel stressed because you're going to feel like your job is insecure, you're going to feel stressed just from being in that environment. Yes, you're going to take a lunch break where you're going to drink coffee and you're going to eat processed foods because that's all there's available to you. You're going to work for another afternoon, and then you're going to go home as the sun is going down, and then maybe you'll get in a workout if you're lucky, or you're going to sit in front of a TV to just try to unwind. And again, can you tell me whose biology was designed for that to be a good thing? Right? And then we're going to stare at a screen all night. We're probably not going to get very good sleep. We're not going to feel connected to our friends. We're not going to feel connected to whatever. And then on the weekends, we're going to be so exhausted that all we can do is all the life maintenance tasks that we didn't have time to do or didn't have the energy to do during the week. Yeah? Or again, we're going to veg out and we're going to numb out because the week was so stressful and so hard or just draining. And then we do it all again. I can't understand why we would think that model, that system is in any way set up for anyone's health. There is no human on the planet, again, whose biology is designed, is set up to thrive under those conditions. Okay? Our biology thrives with sleeping until we wake naturally, being able to get some sun in our eyes before we do anything for our melatonin and for our cortisol to balance out. We thrive on having a nice nutrient-dense breakfast and maybe some movement and maybe some connection, and then doing work that is designed to meet our needs. Doing work that is just enough to meet our needs, that is within the scope of our ability. That is something that is absolutely healthy. Again, work and productivity and doing things are not inherently bad things, nor are they inherently unhealthy things. And again, like in an ideal society, everyone would have their role. Everyone would have their thing that they're good at, that thing that they produce, that thing that they can contribute to society. And then the people who aren't able to contribute would be taken care of by the rest of society because we value life. That would be a healthy society, right? So then we're valuing life. We're valuing what actually has value, which is human life, plant life, animal life, nature. And then we're organizing our productivity in and around that. That would be a healthy society. That would be a healthy structure. And then we work until we don't need to work anymore, until our needs are met. And again, this does not mean that we don't have innovation. This doesn't mean that we don't have people who are going to be ambitious and who are going to want to produce things that don't exist yet and do the heavy labor of innovation and change and all of this stuff. It's just to say that we could do it in a way that's actually healthy via what I'm talking about, right? People working in a way where they, again, see the actual point of working, which is to create the goods and the services that we need as a humanity to thrive and no more. We don't go for more. We don't go for extra. We don't push ourselves beyond that because pragmatically that makes no sense. That's burning fuel that we don't need to burn. That's wasting energy. That would be how we would see it if we were logical beings. If we were like actually living in a system that made any kind of sense. Okay? So we work enough because again, we also want to understand that it's not just about getting our basic needs met. That as humans, we want to express. And a lot of us are going to have ambition, and a lot of us are going to have things that we want to go towards that are difficult and that require effort and that are innovation, like I say. And that would be a part of a healthy society. We would have the right supports and the right structures in place for the people who want to do that, to go do that, and then for everyone to benefit from them doing that. And then we would rest. When the work for the day was done, when we had done enough, we would rest. And we would spend time connecting with one another. And we would spend time eating good food. We would have the time and the energy and the resources left over to do things that were beneficial for us as human beings. That would be a healthy society. And especially in Western cultures, where we have an abundance of resource, where we have an abundance of technology, where we have an abundance of understanding, we could easily create this kind of system where everyone is able to get their needs met through the correct amount of work if our owners of the means of production weren't hoarding and weren't creating a system where we're all in competition with one another, not understanding that the reason we are in that competition is because we are being pit against one another artificially for absolutely the only reason of keeping us locked in this system that burns us out, that makes us feel horrible, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and physically, and thinking it's our fault and that we're not working hard enough or we're not consuming the right things, instead of being able to see that it's because the system is inverted and our and our values are inverted, that we are suffering the way we are suffering. Okay? Because again, the way that our system is set up is to have us in a state where we are in pain. We are responding to the system we have with anxiety, with depression, with health issues, with sleep issues, with feeling like we are garbage and we're not enough and we're never producing enough and we're never consuming enough. We are responding to a system with those emotions and with those reactions. We are responding to a system that is not set up to support our health. We are still not seeing that the anxiety, the depression, the mental health issues, the burnout, the executive dysfunction, like all of these things are being pathologized. And again, I'm all for mental health awareness and being diagnosed as neurodiverse and being diagnosed with, mental health issues and then receiving the support that you need for those issues. That's great. I'm not saying that we shouldn't do that, and I'm not saying that that stuff doesn't exist. I am autistic. I was diagnosed as autistic. My brain absolutely does work differently than everyone else's, and that has altered the way that I have to live my life in order to be happy and healthy. And so, again, I validate that. But at the same time, we also have to understand that if we're getting to a point now where literally, like everyone needs therapy, where literally everyone is struggling with burnout, is struggling with how do I keep my head above water in this system, is struggling with feeling like they're never good enough. Their body is never good enough. Their personality is never good enough. Their productivity and their consumption is never good enough. If we're getting to this point where, again, we still feel so disconnected from one another. Most of us feel just increasingly isolated and lonely and like there's something wrong with us. Yeah? We are feeling continually unsafe. And like this world that we're living in is not set up to keep any of us safe. It's not set up to support us. Everything is antagonistic. We watch the news. The news is stressful. It's, again, pitting us, this person against this person and this group against this group and blaming this person and blaming that person. And it's all set up for us to feel constant competition with one another. For us to feel constantly like we have to find our identity in what we consume and what we produce. Because that was another big part of the manipulation. Okay? In order to get us to consume and produce at the rates that we're consuming and producing. And to not look at the system and be like, okay, this is fucked up. The system is what's broken. This is what's wrong. It's not me. This isn't working. They had to convince us that we could find something that we as human beings deeply and desperately want and need, which is called identity. And they turned around and they convinced us that they could sell us our identity and that we could work and that our work would be our identity as a way of manipulating us again into not questioning the system, into not exploring our humanity, and into saying, okay, if I feel discontent, if I feel not good enough, if I feel in any way like I don't fit in, there's something wrong with me, I'm not getting my needs met, it's not that there's something wrong with the system, it's not that there's something wrong with the value systems we've been taught, it's nothing like this. It all boils down to I'm not consuming the right things and I'm not producing the right things. I'm not identifying with the right brands, I'm not fitting into the right groups based on what I consume and what I produce, right? Like, have you ever looked out at society and realized just how deeply we are segregated into groups based on our income, based on what we consume and what we produce? And that we're like, are you a Pepsi or are you a Coke? Are you a carnivore or are you a vegan? Are you a leftist or are you a right wing? Are you religious or are you atheist? And there's just like this constant culture war, which I believe is like, again, inflamed over and over and over again to keep us in this state of fear and discontent. And then leading into that, competition with one another. Okay, so this is the other thing. The way that our systems are set up, it's this constant state of having to be in competition with everyone around us. This is where I think a lot of people get confused and say the system is set up for men. Because we have been culturally trained and indoctrinated to believe that men are naturally these warriors that are there to fight one another, and they're there to, conquer and tame and take for themselves, and that this is some natural thing that is a good thing, a natural characteristic. So when they go out into the workforce and they're, at each other's necks all day, and everything's this big competition, and everything's just how much can you take from someone while giving the least, that's like a healthy thing for a man to do. That is totally fucked up. No. Okay, men becoming aggressive and doing what they have done, we can easily see that as being an adaptation. Something that had to happen when we were living in nature and there was so much threat and so much, in order to survive, you have to go and kill animals. In order to survive, you have to, defend and protect and all of that stuff. That was an adaptation. Men were able to do that, but that does not mean, therefore, that it is healthy or that that's how we should be. Because again, at the end of the day, the system that we're living in requires, especially people who are in masculine presenting bodies, to shut down their emotions, to shut down their empathy, to live in this constant hyper-arousal state of competition and brutality and lack of connection and lack of support. And then they are miserable. Like, again, the mental health state of most men in our culture who are completely shut down to their emotions, who are disconnected from their true sexuality, and it's been turned into this like a totally abusive, out of control situation. They are, right, like lacking in empathy. We literally have a system where those at the top of the system who have so much more than everyone else, who are hoarding extreme amounts of wealth that they will never need. And rather than turning around and being like, whoa, okay, I got this through exploiting my workforce. I got this through inheriting it through my family that exploited their workforce. And this is totally fucked up. And we could create a reasonable society where everyone has a reasonable quality of life. But instead of that, I'm going to build a rocket to see if I can get myself and my family to the moon, because fuck everyone else. Does that sound like a healthy human psychology to you? Does that sound like health on any level? No, of course not. That is completely a person disconnected from their humanity. That is a person who is operating from a lower level consciousness. They may run the world, but oh boy, are they not in an enlightened state. Are they not operating from higher reasoning or higher awareness? They're literally operating as though they are under attack and under threat all the time. They are acting like wounded animals who are in defense and who are in hoarding constantly, which lets you know that their bodies and their minds and their spirits are not healthy. That is not health. What we have as a system is not healthy for anyone. And again, men acting that way, being in a constant state of competition, being in a constant state of aggression, being shut down from their empathy, being in a state where the whole point is to get more and more and more for themselves at the expense of everyone else, to provide for their family, no matter how they need to do that. That is not a sign of health. That is not good for their health. That is not good for the health of anyone that they're providing for. This is a messed up system that is not healthy for anybody. Right? The incidence of male heart attack alone should let us know that what we have is highly stressful and not okay. What we have as normal is not healthy. It is not healthy for anybody. And so again, like I said, we've been manipulated into believing that this system is the only way. We've been manipulated into believing that this system is healthy. We've been manipulated into believing that luxury and wealth are the ways to happiness, the ways to identity, the ways to connection. And then we live in a society where, to a degree, that is actually true. In order to have access to so many of the things that we humans need to feel good in our lives, not just food and shelter and clothing, but also a feeling of safety, a feeling of belonging, a feeling of being able to, get educated so that you can move up in the system, a feeling of opportunity, a feeling of the community being able to support you. It's behind a paywall. You have to already be in a specific class for that to even be accessible to you. And then again, those who don't have it are pathologized and criminalized and villainized as being the cause of their own demise. They're just making bad choices. They're doing the wrong things. They're not operating how they should operate in the system, when in fact they are operating exactly how the system wants them to. Because when you are without resource and when you are without opportunity, you're going to do whatever you can to try to survive. And then the system gets to say, haha, you're a criminal. And now we get to use your labor and we get to exploit your neighborhoods and we get to do all of these things in order to create more profits for ourselves, and no one bats an eye because you're criminals. And then we do the same thing with people who are mentally unhealthy. And I put that in quotes because a lot of the time, people who are labeled mentally unhealthy are actually people who are just having, again, a healthy response to our totally messed up system. People who blow the whistle on these systems. People who stand up and say, this isn't right. We shouldn't be living like this. People who are upset and angry and want to burn the system down are oftentimes seen as crazy or radical or not okay because they can't just go on and get along. We're stigmatized anytime you do anything that's not just get along in the system. And then the same thing, the same time. Again, I'm not saying therapy is bad. I'm not saying all therapy is like this. But we have to understand that the therapeutic system that treats our mental illness is still a part of the system. It's still birthed within the system that's causing us our harm. So again, we have to start to question, wait, hold on. Do we have rising levels of anxiety and depression because people suck and are just lacking therapy and are just lacking self-care and positive thinking and spiritual healing? Or is it possible that the rise of our mental distress is a response, is a healthy, reasonable response to our systems of domination, competition, and constant manufactured discontent? And again, what I mean by manufactured discontent is either a system that is the system that is set up to make sure that certain groups of people do not have what they need, because that benefits the system. Then those people are easily exploited. They are easily controlled. Their labor and their attention is easily manipulated. Or we're constantly being told that we're not enough, we're not good enough, we're not on trend, we're not doing the right thing, we're not going to be safe because we're not being accepted and approved of, which then triggers us into consuming and producing more. Manufactured discontent. We are in a constant state of competition with one another, manufactured discontent. We've been trained to isolate and to be isolated, so that we depend more and more on the system, because we're all so divided amongst ourselves. We've been trained, right? The nuclear family. We no longer do things that forever we've done in community, like raising children. We're now expected to do that on our own while we work and while we have perfect bodies and while we have perfect clothes and skin and hair and nails and blah, blah. You see what I'm saying? We're at this point where maybe we're all so anxious, depressed, and burnt out. Not because we all need more therapy to teach us regulation tools, but because we need to say, okay, hold on. The way that we're living is unreasonable. The way that we've been trained, we have to live to be good enough and to be safe. And for a lot of us, the way that we do have to live in order to be safe and have enough is unhealthy, is imbalanced. It is too much work. It is too much stress. It is too much disconnection. It's too much consumption. Right? And then again, we wonder, why do I have these coping mechanisms and these self-sabotaging behaviors? Why can't I just get myself to be in a constant state of upward trajectory where I'm constantly achieving my next level of goals and I'm moving up in my career and I'm doing... Because that's unreasonable. That's not how a human being should function. Okay? And then again, right? So we turn to therapy. And therapy tells us you need to learn to regulate. You need to learn to rest by consuming more things that are all behind a paywall. That mean you have to continue to produce the same way that everyone else is producing in order to afford them. Right? Like, so many mental health professionals being like, watch out for the dangers of the social media therapy. But like, most people, that's the therapy they can afford. That's the therapy they have. Right? Like, I'm not a trained therapist, but I have been through enough. And I've learned enough tools that I have a mystery school and I sell it for $15 per month for everything. It's 5 courses at this point. Because again, we live in a world where so much of this stuff is only available to people who are already rich. And how is that helpful? That isn't helpful. And my whole thing is, yes, learn to regulate. Yes, learn these things. And also, can we start to question that maybe the reason you feel the way that you feel and that you're experiencing what you're experiencing is not because of a lack in you. It's not because you didn't learn to regulate. It's not because you don't have enough self-care tools. It's because you are always going to respond to an unhealthy system with pain. That's normal. That's natural. It's, can we stop trying to fix you and start looking at, why are you reacting and responding the way that you are? Why do you have the trauma that you have? Where did that come from? Where did those toxic family systems that we're all trying to heal from come from? Greater culture. It came from parents being burnt out. It came from parents not having resources. It came from all of this being totally unhealthy and totally imbalanced. And we wonder why we're all traumatized. Because the system is traumatizing. Okay, the metaphor that I have is still, we can learn all the self-regulation we want. We can learn all the positive thought we want. We can have all the goals and be achieving all the things and other. And if our hand is on a burner, there is always going to be pain. Because that pain is there to show us that we are being damaged. That is the point of pain. That is the point of a mental pain. That is the point of emotional pain. That is the point of physical pain. It is not, right, again, like we are still so emotionally illiterate that we still think we are choosing our negative emotions. That we are choosing our anxiety or our depression and that we can just unchoose it. It is a response. Just like pain when you touch fire is a response, and that is a response you want. You don't want to get to a point where you've regulated so much that you no longer feel the pain of your hand on a burner, because you know what that means? Your hand is going to get singed beyond repair. So good, you learn to regulate, you learn to self-care, you learn to whatever, and now your hand is burned off because you numbed your pain so much with your regulating and your self-care that you didn't look at why I am in pain. That is what we are doing. We are saying the system is fine. Everything is fine. This is how it should be. And if you can't keep up, and if it's distressing for you, we need to fix you. Instead of saying, is your hand on a burner? Are you being damaged and destroyed? And is that pain trying to tell you to take your hand off? So again, I'm not trying to say that therapy is bad and we shouldn't do it. A lot of us do need to talk out the shit we've been through. We need to be validated. We need to be seen. We need to learn these tools of self-validation and self-love. Because that's what helps us to get to the next point. That's not the end point. That's the start point. That's what helps us get to the next level where we can start to question, okay, why did these things happen? Why am I in pain? What if it isn't that there's something wrong with me? This is why I will never stop talking about the self-love path. Because again, sometimes it is our perception that's out of alignment. Sometimes the healing that needs to happen is personal. Sometimes. And sometimes it's a response to a system. And we need to stop beating ourselves up so that we can start to say, okay, what's wrong with the system? What's wrong with the way we're doing things? And maybe the answer is checking out of these things. Maybe the answer is I don't participate in that anymore, right? Like we learn to have enough self-esteem and self-confidence that we're no longer so manipulatable by the idea that you're going to get kicked out of the group and people aren't going to like you if you're different. So we can start to say, I'm not going to participate in some of these shitty things anymore because they hurt. They hurt me and they hurt everyone else. I'm not going to be exploited. So been saying this to my clients and told my own therapist this. Of course, she looked at me like, yeah, exactly. Because again, right? Like it's all still the system. And if anything is just stopping at how do we regulate you so that you can go and function in society the way that society is, as though society is healthy and fine, it's not it. It's not it. Right? Again, why are we all at this place now where we all think that our parents emotionally abused us? Probably because they did. Because they were emotionally abused. Because the system is fucked up. It's not healthy for anybody. Why are we all burnt out at work? And burnt out trying to be our highest and best selves? And burnt out trying to keep up with the trends? And burnt out and burnt out and burnt out? Because our system is not designed for pragmatic production and pragmatic consumption. It's designed for humans to sacrifice themselves as much as possible. So they will be better producers and better consumers, so those who are at the top can exploit us more while ever increasing our consumption. Because again, right, like we're trained, we're burnt out, we're exploited, we feel like shit. And then they're like, no problem, we're going to sell you a bunch of entertainment and, foods that stimulate your brain and clothes and experiences to distract you from all that pain so that you can get back to work and keep producing, and then your reward is a bunch of things that literally destroy you in order to try to make you feel better, and it's this round and round and round and round cycle. Where again, so long as you're in a state of consumption or production, you're useful to the system. The second you say, okay, I'm going to take a break from this, I have enough, I'm fine, I'm going to actually self-care. I'm going to self-care by going for a walk outside. I'm going to self-care by actually creating a supportive community where I'm not in competition with the people I'm around and we actually nourish each other. Then you're not producing and you're not consuming, and then you're not useful to the system, and then you're not enough. You're not good enough. You're not right. Yes? And yeah, I think the system is great with everyone going to therapy. It's more money for them. So long as it equals you just trying harder to work while you're regulated, it's not a solution. Yeah? Our systems are not healthy. They're not healthy for anybody. Competition, never being outside, overproduction and overconsumption, disconnection from our humanity, and our reaction and our responses to these horrible systems being pathologized, that's all unhealthy. That does not support anyone's system. No one is thriving in this system. And the people who are thriving, to the degree that they can, are just the ones that have money. And that's not fair. It shouldn't be that way because it doesn't have to be that way. If you're wealthy enough to have time to exercise and time to eat healthy food and time to meditate and you don't have to work that much, you're incredibly privileged. And unfortunately, most people don't have that. And so, right, like in the health and wellness world, there's just like all this talk about your health just being a personal choice. But like, no, it isn't. People are born with chronic illnesses. We get sick. There are things that we don't have control over. And then again, how much access do you have? Because that fundamentally alters how healthy you can be. And in our pyramid scheme of a system, it's not a choice for everybody. The pathologization of our response to this system is just another way in which we're being manipulated. The idea that we can all just be perfectly healthy in the system, and if you aren't, it's because you're making bad choices, is the system. The idea that you just need to learn to regulate and set boundaries and self-care so that you can get on with the system, and that is the thing that's missing, is the system. This is not working for any of us. This is not healthy for any of us. This is why the self-love path is the thing that I teach. We need to get past our shame and our guilt that keep us trapped in thinking that our pain is our fault, which is exactly how this is, which drives us into that manufactured discontent. What do I need to do to fix myself? How do I need to consume more and produce more? So that we can start to say, wait. If it's not that I am broken, wrong, bad, and shameful, right? I'm going to heal my childhood wounds enough to be able to get past my shame and my guilt so I can see the system and how it's functioning and how it's not supporting any of us and how I might be responding and in need of care and support and change versus fixing and improving and regulating. That is the path. We need to stop pathologizing ourselves And we need to start saying what might be wrong with the way we're doing things. With our inverted system that values productivity and consumption over human life, over life in general. Maybe no one thrives under competition and separation all the time. Because look at the people who are at the top of our system. They are in the most separation and the most competition. And they are very unbalanced. It's not good. It's not working. And it's not you. Okay? Okay. So some things to think about. Please realize there's nothing wrong with you. Your shame and your guilt are never true. There's more to this story. You deserve to find freedom from this by being kind to yourself and seeing beyond the conditioning through the avenue of self-love and compassion and curiosity. What if it's not you that's broken? What if you're responding? Okay? Okay. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. I appreciate you. And I will see you in the next video.